Well, what do y'all say we take another call?
Please do.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we have next up Neo Shark. I love the name. Pronouns are he, him, and he's got a question for us about BDSM. So let's hear it. Neo Shark, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me. Uh,
Yeah, thanks for
so
calling.
I went to a munch last night and I came across something that, like, I've been fairly active in the BDSM and kink community for about a decade now. And this is the first time that I've ever come across this kind of thing. So I had a lovely conversation with someone at the munch. We talked about a whole slew of things. I finally got to talk to something about like atheism and skeptical thinking. So that was fun. But then they like I forget how we got into the topic, but they explained that apparently that I won't say where it is, but in this certain kink community, there is apparently this unspoken rule that tops are not allowed to ask bottoms for play, and this has literally been the first time that I've ever heard this, and it was genuinely upsetting because after hearing this, looking back in hindsight at some of my interactions, because I recently branched out into this new community, and some of the interactions that I had with some people just struck me as very strange. Like I
Hmm.
messaged someone, I messaged because like what I like. I like pickup play, and what are the ways I like making friends is kind of like with pickup play. I like making meeting new people, talking about their kinks, and like doing some like light pickup play stuff. Nothing super intense, just casual stuff, really fun. And it's kind of been my modus operandi. And so one of the things I do is I just like check out munches and events local by, see people that I might be interested in playing with, and like send them messages like, "Hey, I'm branching out to this new area, looking for new play partners. Are you interested?" And because I ostensibly present as white, cis, hetero male, for most of my adult life and young adult life, my experience on the internet is that I'm just ignored for the most part. Like,
Hmm.
and like, if I don't initiate anything, then nothing happens. And so to come to this new location and to find out that basically I'm not allowed to initiate anything was,
Hmm.
I mean, like, what upset me was that it wasn't clearly expressed. If it was like at a dungeon with the set of rules, I could understand that. But this is
Yeah,
apparently
that's what I
some
was going to ask.
un-
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in, but I just really wanted to clarify that point. We're not talking about like a play party or a dungeon
no,
situation where there has been a problem and so there's like a codified rule. You're just saying that it seems to be the culture here for, it's not even a rule, it's just happens to be the habit that tops aren't
exactly.
really allowed to ask bottoms. Okay.
It's it's expected, and if you violate this expectation, you were essentially ostracized. Now,
Okay.
I like I said, I just found this out yesterday, and some of my other interactions kind of lead me to believe that this isn't prevalent within the entire community here. It's just
Yeah.
like probably a subset. And it was extremely upsetting because like I had interactions with people and I thought things were going well. Like I had like a little mix up with someone and they just promptly blocked me and I was like, whatever, this is not the first time. I just moved on with my life. I happened to meet them at the munch later on. I just explained like, hey, I don't have a problem with you blocking me. You whatever reason is fine, legitimate. I don't care. I just like don't want this to become awkward later on when you find like if we hit it off and you find out later, oh, this is that
Yeah.
person that I blocked. And then like I thought everything was fine. Like it was a little awkward, but everything was fine. And they even sent me a message like, "Hey, what are you doing here? Like, why did you come here?" And I sent like a nice, long, several paragraph response because like I'm fairly certain I'm slightly autistic or on the spectrum, I should say. And so I sent like a nice long reply, explained kind of like highlights and everything, and then nothing. And then
Mm.
I saw them a few more times at the munch, and I kind of got this vibe that things were kind of awkward with us. And like ever since then, I just stopped interacting with them, and they just promptly ignored me. And so that's one of the instances that kind of like struck me as strange. And there was another conversation I had with like a group of people who, like, we were talking about things, and I talked like, yeah, sometimes like if I'm at a munch and I'm really hitting it off with someone, I'll be and like afterwards I'll be like, hey, if you want to do something kinky after this, like I'd be up for it, but like no pressure, nothing, like no expectations. If you don't want to, you're not comfortable. I know we just like met, like no problem. And like two of the people that I was having, it was like a group, two of the people that I was having conversations with were legitimately upset to like, I like, even at the time before I knew this, they were upset to a surprising degree that I recognized at that time. And it just struck me as
I hear
odd.
that.
And like one of the
Yeah.
people, kind of the similar situation as the previous one, like I thought we had hit it off and had a conversation. Nope, blocked next time I checked.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of why I put some kind of like justification into like what the story I
You
heard.
didn't just
like
dismiss that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right to be a little skeptical. Anytime we're talking about unwritten rules, we need to really be mindful that we not take them too seriously. And, you're being skeptical and looking at how you as an individual have had these sort of anecdotal experiences. So, there's some real like logical and statistical fallacies to be mindful of. So I'm glad that you
Mhm.
are being like willing to challenge some of those things. But it is
Well,
true that we
not
live
originally.
in
It took a little bit of calming down for me to like the rational
I
part
hear
to kick
that.
in.
Yeah, and that's fair. But I mean, I'm not trying to justify or defend, but particularly when we're talking about something that is so like vaguely enforced and people might not even know that they're thinking in that pattern, it's worth remembering that we live in a bottom-heavy world and that abusers, when they exist in the kink community, are overrepresented as representing themselves as dominants. So there is, I guess, a rationale here, but that
No,
doesn't
I
mean that
actually
there's like room for active discrimination. No, I'm sorry. Let me let you clarify.
um no, like I understand where you're coming from, and actually like uh, the person like at the bunch, like I have a partner there too, and so like afterwards we went back to their place and uh had a conversation, and they actually uh said something that like just struck me like getting knocked in the back of the head by a 2x4. They said like sometimes from like again I present as very stereotypical straight male, and so from the other end, if the other person is having a conversation with someone, and then suddenly at the end they're like, "Hey, you want to do kinky stuff or have sex?" It might cause them to question my intentions, and so that kind of like put things into a different perspective. So I could see where this kind of rule originated from. Like if that
Hmm.
like
Mhm.
it wasn't ever that was one of the most upsetting things about like finding this out is that it was unwritten. No one bothered to clearly express this. And what was the other point I had? Like no one took the time to explain like, hey, that's not really because like I'm very clear, like I'm fairly new to this area, like and
Hmm.
no one bothered to take the time to be like, hey, like that's not kind of the thing here. It's like some people take offense to that.
Yeah. I mean,
Like I can
let's
definitely see
just
where
acknowledge that it's a bad rule, right? Like I can kind of justify the rationale for it to a certain extent, but anytime we are limiting our communication and like swallowing our words when talking about our sexuality and seeking out sexual partners, we're hamstringing ourselves. We don't want to be handcuffed by not being allowed to talk about certain things. I
hmm
get the notion of not wanting to like pester or nag somebody into having sex with you. So, there's a reason for it. And I think it
Mhm.
is just important to remember that these communities are formed as a way of keeping people safe from some very real dangers. And a filter that catches every problem is also going to accidentally catch some dolphins, or however you want to stretch that metaphor. So I
Yeah.
guess all I can really say is I'm glad that you have gotten your feet wet in this community and gotten some sense of what maybe the lay of the land and what the local cultural flavor might be. When it comes to culture, we can't even really say good or bad. I call it a bad rule because as a therapist, I just think it's going to cause a lot of problems. But
No,
you're
I
here.
agree.
Yeah, it doesn't apply to everybody. Like it's not a rule. It's a cultural moray, if we will, and it's one that is just begging to be maybe not actively or aggressively violated, but at least like
No, yeah, 'cause, like,
conscientiously
I
pushed
had
back against.
yeah, I had to think about it, and, like, originally, I was gonna be, like, all fire and brimstone, gung ho, because I was gonna, like, write a post on FetLife, but, like, I've since calmed down. I'm gonna take a more nuanced approach because, like, I sat down and I analyzed it, and I realized, like, the rule is kind of, toxic. Well, the toxic in the sense that how it is enacted, because it is a rule that is not clearly communicated, which is literally setting people up to fail. Because new
Sure.
people come in and there's this rule that you're supposed to follow, but you don't know the rule because no one tells you. It's like inviting someone to
It's
play a
inherently
game, and
discriminatory. Yeah.
one of the rules that determines whether or not you can win isn't even told to you.
Mhm.
And
Well,
then
and I'm
again, there's the
curious
whole it
too.
discriminates against tops.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You've come back a few times to that. I didn't even know about the rule. How are they having a rule without even telling people that it's there? Did anybody follow up with you and say what is the expectation? Like it sounds like you got the message that okay, tops are not supposed to be asking bottoms to play, but did they say what is being expected? Was there any kind of clear communication about what those expectations are when this did eventually come up? Or is it still unclear?
So so when I was talking to the person who like kind of like revealed the whole thing and kind of like put my past experience into perspective, they said what tops are expected to do is kind of just like have talk to people and kind of in a sense like put out their wares and be like, hey, this is what I can do, and then that's it, and then just sit and wait, I guess.
Mm.
But again, this was told to me by a person who like this was the first time I was interacting with. I wasn't. It was just a conversation, and I wasn't interested in playing with them. And it's just kind of that.
Yeah. Sounds like
Yeah.
good advice to listen to, not necessarily good advice to obey. Is that a fair way of
Yeah.
framing it, y'all think?
Yeah, it is starting to sound to me too like maybe it's someone's reporting their idea of what someone else feels
Mhm.
comfortable with, and we're kind of playing telephone at this point.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like I said, there's like three major dungeons in this area. One that I've been to fairly regularly because they have a lot of free nights, and I'm kind of in a financially strained situation right now. And like I've had pretty good experiences there. I mean, heck, I told you like I went to a munch and met my current partner. So like I have had some success. I have made some connections. So how prevalent this rule is, I don't know. I have no understanding. But
Mhm.
like I said, with some of my experiences, it kind of lines up. So there is some people who seem to follow this kind of rule.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you are starting to get settled in, that you've got your eyes open. I'm sorry that you've been through this, but I guess I would just encourage you to softly bear this quote unquote rule in mind
Mhm.
without actually feeling obligated to it. Gently sort of pushing back against that while doing what you can to just be yourself. And I
Yeah, that's
do appreciate you kind of raising the question for us.
yeah. I'm interested in hearing like other people's perspective, but like so the thing that there was two things that kind of like upset me. It was the whole there was this rule that I was expected to follow that no one communicated, but it's also the fact that there was this kind of like toxic culture within a community. I've been active in the community for 10 years. Like I started my kind of like journey in Texas, moved to Wisconsin. I've been active in Madison, Milwaukee, and now this new place that I don't feel comfortable talking about really.
Sure.
But and throughout my entire almost 10 years, this is the first time I've ever experienced anything remotely like this. And it just
Hmm.
like I said, struck me like a 2x4 to the back of the head. I was like, what is this? Because one of the things that I really like about the kink community is that we put so much emphasis on like clear communication and
Right.
very
Exactly.
like detailed negotiations. Like the clear negotiation is one of the ways that we defend ourselves against the bad actors within the kink community. Because like one of the things they like to do, like one of the things the bad actors, one of the things the predators in the kink community like to do, one of the things is they will deliberately leave out like sexual contact within the negotiation, and then during the scene they will go for it and then use the fact that it wasn't negotiated as kind of like a get out of jail
Right.
card.
Yeah. No, no, clear
Yeah.
communication is crucial. So yeah, that's why I would definitely encourage you to not take this too much to heart. It very much sounds like Kara said is rather anecdotal evidence. I'm sure that somebody somewhere has felt that way, and I'm sure a lot of people act that way. But people get bad dating advice in every community, and so
Mhm.
I'm glad that you're kind of like working through some of this.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up too. I mean, it's a good question. And yeah, glad we got to talk about it. And I agree completely with Christy. Just, keep communicating with people, take it with a grain of salt and go from there. But
Hmm.
thanks for the call. I'm going to go ahead and let you go so we can move on. We're getting close to the end of the show, but I appreciate you calling in and feel free to check back in and let us know how it's going later.